Hi, readers. Take 15. I am unreliable, and today I'm going to be reading The Phantom in the Attic by ReaderRevolution. Link in description. Summary. By the end of the week, Danny wasn't sure what kind of asylum he'd crawled into. The butler tried to feed him. He didn't eat human food anymore, and the man looked so guilty when Danny refused that he almost felt guilty. Someone hung up crosses in the attic. Danny ignored them, but when they brought up putting up Christmas lights, he hissed on instinct and nearly melted through the floorboards. The angry sword kid tried to evict him again. Danny iced him into a snowdrift in the corner. Not his fault if he kept coming back. The insomniac came back with the skeptoscope for some reason. He pressed it against the casket lid and mumbled about no heartbeat. Danny gave one loud, dramatic snore in response. All Danny wanted was one thing. Just one. Sleep. Was that so hard? Apparently, in this household, yes. Or, Danny just wanted a nap. Instead, he got a nosy family and a stuffed bat named Steve. Danny did his best to ignore the voices. Hey. Nope, not today. Get up. Not happening. You can't be here. Watch me. How did you even get in here? Danny cracked an eye open at that one, glaring at the pale boy hovering over him. He looked about his age, dark eye circles like permanent war paint under his eyes, following clearly a fellow insomniac. Am I just not allowed to rest? Danny groaned, rolling in his side. Not when it's in our attic, the stranger replied flatly. Danny scoffed, sitting up just enough to gesture at the casket. Shouldn't have a casket in here if you don't want someone crawling in. The boy opened his mouth. Shut it. Open it again. Then stared at Danny like he was a glitch in the Matrix. Danny decided he'd had enough. Reached up and slammed the casket lid shut. Ice spread across the seams, locking it tight. Hey! Came the muffled voice. Danny rolled over inside the velvet lining with a sigh. Blissful silence. Except silence didn't last long in his house, apparently. Someone else came up later. He could tell by the quick footsteps and the faint muttering that whoever it was wasn't happy about investigating the attic. The lid creaked open a second before Danny shut it again, this time adding 2 layers of ice. Didn't even bother looking this time. A young voice rumbled through the casket wood. Why is there ice coming off of this casket? Not my problem, Danny mumbled, already drifting back into dreamland. The lid rattled as if someone was trying to pry it open, but Danny just scooted deeper into the velvet lining. Whoever it was, they could fight the ice. Danny wasn't moving. He'd run away from Amity Park to avoid this kind of nonsense. He hadn't asked to be adopted by some random attic family. By day 3, Danny realized his mistake. They were noisy. The first kid kept coming back. Annoying insomniac guy who clearly needed a nap more than Danny did. He knocked, he yelled, he even tried bribery. Danny ignored him. Then came the smaller, angrier one. The casket lid was yanked open, and Danny found himself face to face with a kid wielding a katana. A katana. In someone's casket. In someone's attic. Leave, the boy demanded. Danny yawned. Nah. He shut the lid again. The kid tried to pry it open, but Danny iced it shut, and rolled over. A second later, the entire casket The entire casket rolled right back to its original. I'm so sorry. A second later, the entire casket jointed like it was being shoved. Danny sat up from inside with a scowl. The kid was dragging the casket around the attic floor. Out the window you go, pest! Danny phased the casket right back to its original spot, and shouted through the lid. No, you're insane! No, you're trespassing! Danny groaned and buried his face in the cushion. He was too tired for this. By the end of the week, Danny wasn't sure what kind of asylum he crawled into. The butler tried to feed him. He didn't eat human food. And the man looked so sad when Danny refused that he almost felt guilty. Someone strung up crosses in the attic. Danny ignored them, but when they brought up putting in Christmas lights, he hissed on instinct and nearly melted through the floorboards. The angry sword kid tried to evict him again. Danny iced him into a snowdrift in the corner. Not his fault if he kept coming back. The insomniac came back with a stethoscope for some reason, pressing it against the casket lid and murmuring about no heartbeat. Danny gave one loud, dramatic snore in response. All Danny wanted was one thing. Just one. Sleep. Was that so hard? Apparently, in this household, yes. Danny was halfway through a really good nap when the lid creaked open again. He tensed, ready to ice it shut. But then, a hand, soft and steady, slid a pillow under his head, and another tucked a blanket under him. Danny creaked one bleary eye open. It was a girl this time. Quiet. Silent like a shadow. And she just smothered the blanket, patting his head once and closed the lid again. Danny blinked into the dark velvet interior. Thanks, he mumbled, awkward, but he meant it. She nodded once, satisfied, and slipped away like she had never been there. Danny hung the pillow to his chest, a little misty-eyed, despite himself. I like her, he whispered, already sinking back into sleep. From then on, he made exceptions for the quiet girl. Showed up with an armful of extra pillows one day. Danny sat up just long enough to take them, arranged them into a paper cocoon, and flopped face first back into the pile. Another time, she left a cup of tea on top of the casket. Danny didn't drink it, but the thought counted. Once, she even Once, she even cracked the lid open to check on him. Danny, half asleep, just shoved his head against her hand until she gave him absent-minded pet pats. She obliged. He purred. Not on purpose, just ghost things. Don't judge. The rest of the family, still insane. The sword kid was restless. Danny started calling him Angry Bird in his head, because if the shoe fits... Preach to me, Bird Kid demanded one morning, ripping the casket open. Danny cracked an eye. No. Howard. Nap time. Slam. Ice sealed. The butler still tried with food. One day it was sandwiches, the next day full trays. Once Danny peeked and saw a roast chicken. He sighed, whispered, "Sorry, man," and shut the lid again. The insomniac graduated from bringing in medical equipment. Danny had opened the casket lid one day and found him mid-blood pressure cupped attempt. Dude, you don't eat, you don't breathe, you don't have a pulse. Danny yanked the cuff, tossed it across the attic, and shut the lid. The quiet girl? Yeah, she was safe. Danny let her open the lid any time. She never asked questions, never tried to drag him out, just handed him things like earplugs, a heavier blanket, or a stuffed bat. He kept the stuffed bat, named it Steve. Steve was an excellent pillow. Better than half the people in this house, that was sure. Danny was almost comfortable with his new setup. Pillows from the quiet girl, Steve the plush, a couple of blankets he iced to the perfect cool temperature, when the attic door slammed open like it was in a horror movie. The footsteps this time were different, heavy, confident. Whoever it was didn't stomp around like they owned the place. No, it was someone they knew owned the place. Danny cracked the lid a fraction of an inch and peeked. Big guy, broad-shouldered, leather jacket, a white streak in his hair. He leaned against the wall with all the casual menace of someone who's seen some things and wasn't oppressed by much anymore. Jason, he introduced himself a minute later. You're a squatter, Jason said. You're the guy with bad hair dye, Danny countered, shutting the lid halfway. Jason barked out a laugh. Okay, I kinda like you. Cool. Shut the door on the way out. Danny flipped back onto Steve. Jason didn't leave. Of course he didn't. He dragged over an old chair, plopped himself down next to the casket, and opened a bag of chips. Tim's losing his mind over you, Jason said conversationally. Keeps talking about corpses and undead squatters. Damien's convinced you're a parasite. Dick wants to adopt you or something. Alfred's kind of insulted you won't eat. And Cass, well, he hesitated, then smirked. Cass likes you. Danny muffled his voice into Steve. Cass has taste. Danny snorted. Jason snorted. Yeah, she does. They sat in silence for a while. Well, Jason crunched chips and Danny tried to sleep through it. He was halfway through Sleepland when Jason spoke up again. So, what are you exactly? Danny cracked one eye open, tired. Jason raised his brows, unimpressed. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting, Danny yawned, curling deeper into the casket. No, shut up, Stinkstripe. Steve and I are busy. Steve? Danny proudly held up the stuffed bat. Jason stared, then, against all odds, he grinned. You know what? Fine, you win. He ruffled Danny's hair through the half-open casket lid and stood. Don't tell anyone, but I'm rooting for you, Coffin Boy. The lid shut gently. Danny blinked in the dark, startled, then hugged Steve closer. I like him too. Danny had settled into somewhat of a routine. Nap, get harassed by Angry Bird, nap, get poked by medical equipment by the insomniac, nap, receive pillows/head pats from the quiet girl, nap, Jason hanging out like they were attic roommates, nap again. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. Until one night, when the attic door creaked open again. Danny frowned into Steve's soft wings. The footsteps were different this time, measured, deliberate. Whoever was moving had the kind of calm confidence that usually belonged to predators. The lid lifted slowly, carefully, like whoever was on the other side was worried about what they might find. Danny blinked up gruffly. He hadn't iced it shut tonight. Danny had convinced him to let the family cool down. Pun intended. And that meant some stranger was now staring right at him. Square jaw, dark hair, tall, radiating dad energy in the way that made Danny's ghost core twitch nervously. Danny sat up fast, eyes glowing in the dark inferior. What? The man the man stumbled back with a shark intake, his hand twitching towards his belt. Yeah, definitely predator energy. Before he froze entirely. Danny tilted his head. You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. The man just stared, which, okay, rude. Danny knew the glowing eyes were a bit much in the dark, but still. Yeah, he sighed and flopped back into his pillow fort. If you're here to evict me, take a number. Angry Bird already tried, and spoiler alert, it didn't work. The man finally managed to speak, voice low and rough. You're not supposed to be here. Danny groaned to Steve. That's what you all keep saying. I didn't break into your attic. I just found the casket. It's free real estate. Not my fault you had good velvet. Silence. Danny peeked up again. The man hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked, just standing there like he was seeing the devil. Do you want a pillow? Danny asked, genuinely confused. The man turned on his heel and left without a word. Footsteps deliberate again, but heavier. Danny stared after him. Weirdo. He cuddled Steve closer and drifted back to sleep. Downstairs, Bruce Wayne entered the kitchen at 3 in the morning, pale as a sheet. Jason was sitting on the counter, eating cold leftovers straight from the pan. You okay, B? Jason asked, around a mouthful. Bruce just whispered. There's a glowing-eyed corpse child in the attic. Jason grinned. Yeah, that's Danny. Bruce freezed. You named it? Jason shrugged. Nah, he named himself. Well, I'm not sure who named him, but that's how he introduced himself. Point is, he's harmless. Just don't touch him. Bruce rubbed his temple. You've been living with that? For how long? Jason smirked. About 2 weeks. Welcome to the party, old man. The next morning, Bruce did what he always did when confronted with something bizarre, terrifying, or supernatural. He prepared a full interrogation strategy. Coffee brewed, files organized, a chair was dragged up to the attic and placed directly across from the casket. He was ready. The casket creaked, slowly. Danny's head popped out, hair sticking in 50 different directions. His eyes were glowing faintly, and his pillow was clutched against his chest like a lifeline. Bruce leaned forward, every inch the dark night. Who are you? Danny yawned so wide Bruce could see the tips of his fangs. Nah. He promptly flopped sideways onto the pillow and closed the lid again. Bruce blinked. This was not the response he had anticipated. He knocked on the casket. We need to talk. From inside came a muffled bleeping. Bruce pressed his lips into a thin line. This is important. The lid cracked open an inch, one glowing eye peeking out. You got a better pillow? Bruce blinked again. What? The lid shut with a decisive thud. That's when Jason appeared, leaning casually against the wall with his arms crossed and an obnoxious smirk busted across his face. He said he's sleeping. Maybe let the kid rest be? Bruce narrowed his eyes. Jason, this is not a stray dog. This is a roommate? Jason interrupted smoothly. Jason. Look, the kid's harmless. Tim's convinced he's a zombie. Damien keeps trying to stake him. Cast likes him. And me? Well, I think he's funny. He's not hurting anyone, unless you count Damien's ego. From inside, a faint, sleepy, his ego tastes gross. Jason snorted. See? Harmless. Bruce pinched the bridge of his nose. You're telling me you allowed a possible undead intruder to nest in our attic? Allowed? Jason laughed. B. No one allows Danny to do anything. Trust. We tried. He just sleeps through it. As if on cue, the casket rattled slightly, then went quiet. Danny had fallen back asleep. Bruce stared at it for a long moment, then muttered, This isn't sustainable. Jason shrugged. You'll get used to it. It happened on Tuesday. Bruce was already knee-deep in contingency planning. Tim had 3 separate Is He Undead spreadsheets running. Damien was sharpening a new set of weapons. And Jason was guarding the attic door like a guard dog with a vendetta. Then the doorbell rang. As always, Alfred opened it with his usual calm. He was met with a young woman carrying a cardboard duffel bag and wearing an expression that screamed, I'm so done with this nonsense. Delivery, she said. Alfred tilted his head. Pardon? Sorry. Sorry. You wanna lay with me? Pardon? Alfred said, tilting his head. Yeah, she said, brushing past him like she lived here. One dumbass runaway, currently comatose. I'm here to collect before he squats your house forever. Trust me, you don't want that. By the time Alfred gathered his wits, she was already stomping up the stairs. The family followed in confusion as the stranger marched into the attic, planted herself in front of the frosty casket, and rattled her knuckles on the lid. Daniel James Fenton, she announced. You are in so much trouble. The casket lid creaked. A very sleepy Danny peeked out, blinked, and then groaned. Jazz, how'd you find me? Because you yanked. Because you left your phone on, idiot. She yanked the casket lid all the way open and pointed to the glowing screen nested against his pillow. Also, you've been sharing your location. Rookie mistake. Danny yawned. I wasn't hiding. You were squatting, she corrected, already hooking her arms over his shoulders like she's done this 1,000 times. Danny flopped a limp in protest. Too tired. 5 more hours. Nope. She bodily lifted him out of the velvet lining, pillow and all. You're not haunting rich people's attics, Danny. We talked about this. Jason stepped forward instantly. Hold on. You can't just leveled him with a flat look. You his keeper? Jason hesitated. Kinda? Cool, Jas said, utterly unimpressed. He still goes home. She dragged Danny towards the stairs while he mumbled sleepily against her shoulder. Betrayal, he whispered at Jason. Jason's jaw dropped. What? Hey, no, I didn't. Jas ignored them both. Manipulating Coffin and Boy with practice ease. She muttered under her breath the whole way down. 1 week. You couldn't last 1 week without me. Unbelievable. The Waynes trailed behind in stunned silence as Jas carried Danny and his entire casket right out of the front door. Bruce finally managed to speak. Who are you? Who are you? Jas gave him a look like he just asked if water was wet. I'm Jas, and I'm the only reason you're not gonna end up with a permanent dead kid in your attic. Don't thank me. Then she shoved the casket into the back of her beat-up car, drove Danny on top of it like excess luggage, and drove off. The Bat family just stood there in the attic, in the doorway, processing. Jason finally muttered, I feel robbed.